All right. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I think we should start with just some introductions, and we'll go from there. I'm Felicia Williams. Delighted to be here today. I'm the president of Prince George's Community College.
Hi, I'm Jessica Rosenberg. I am faculty at George Mason University in Physics and Astronomy and Director of Education for our Quantum Science and Engineering Center.
Alex Fuentes. I manage the Computer Science and STEM and the Arts programs for Fairfax County Public Schools.
Fantastic, and we're on round two. We had this same party last year for a wonderful group. Tomasz couldn't be here today, so we're going to go ahead. I think we'll start with the first question that was posed to us, which is, what is the difference between a talent pipeline and workforce development? And so, who'd like to weigh in? I'll give closing thoughts on that.
Since the microphone's closer, I'll start. I think to me the difference actually, often when we talk about workforce development, we're talking about sort of the shorter term between preparation and jobs. And I think as an educator, one of the places we get a little bit stuck is as we start to work our way back towards those earlier ages and grades and things. What does it mean to do workforce development when part of it's also about education, about broadening horizons, about thinking at these various levels about where these students might go? And to me, that's really the piece that's about building talent more broadly, beyond just sort of the narrower workforce development. But that's my own.
Nice. As a former high school biology teacher, I want to lean into the word ecosystem. So in our talk, we'll be really talking about the connecting points across the different people in the community. So our Economic Development Authority, our local industry, higher ed, K-12 education, which is what I'll speak to. It's really about, and museums, nonprofits, the ways in which people can connect with each other to create more opportunities for people in the system. And for K-12, that's our youth and our children to be able to access what the opportunities are for the future, get inspired about what they can do, what role they can have, and how they can create our future for us.
Excellent. And I think it depends on the audiences that we're encountering. Sometimes when we hear the terminology workforce development in an academic environment, we really are talking about the kind of programs that are shorter than a degree, that lead to the development of talent for particular sectors in our economy. And so these are really more statutorial kind of definitions that help us to be able to distinguish between the types of certifications and other credentials besides degrees. When we begin to look at the talent pipeline, we're really looking at everyone, right, who is in the ecosystem, that you are in a structured path or a structured set of skill training to be able to attain a job in that way. If I were to connect the two broadly, we would say that it would be from degrees to certifications that lead people into the workforce, and hopefully the kind of workforce that is going to be on an economic trajectory where they're at least in the middle class. But if we just think about it in these very narrow terms, and we look at, again, sometimes the kind of legislation that is being passed specifically related to workforce development, it's focused on short-term programs, but those that are specifically aligned to high-wage and high-demand jobs in the midst of it. So, and let me just say, if we have time at the end, we certainly welcome a bit of commentary and banter around the things that are being shared today. So, ready for these questions? All right, the first one. You each have a different point of reference on the quantum talent ecosystem. Where do you see the role of the sectors in which you work between higher education, K-12, and NSF?
Sure. Okay, for K-12, we have a role in inspiring students and making sure that our students know what the opportunities are in the field. So it's about access to opportunity. And that means when we think about an ecosystem that we have a role as connectors. So connecting with industry and with higher education. And when we share some models of success that we've had so far, you'll hear that those models all have those connecting pieces.
So at the university level, I think we're sort of, again, one of those pieces between, obviously, K-12 and the jobs. And so working with programs across undergraduate, for undergraduate students, for graduate students, right, they're at different levels, preparing those students, but it's also about engaging them and getting them interested, because we know that they're not coming out of K-12 knowing what quantum is in general, with the exception of a few handfuls in some of the programs we've been developing to try to open these doors to them. When we've talked to STEM students broadly, right, they don't know what quantum is. They're interested, they've maybe heard the word, but so that introduction piece is as important as that deeper education piece if we want to really grow this ecosystem and develop it so that they're prepared for whatever they decide comes next in this area.
I think education is one of those areas where we have this strong sense that we are an ecosystem. We either think of it as an ecosystem or we think of ourselves as a pipeline. We're moving students all the way from, frankly, the cradle. We think of P20 and beyond in terms of how we do our work. Quantum, though, is one of those fields that I think is challenging us in a different way, because we often think about it from the time of early childhood and that there's a natural progression. But as we think about quantum, it's a bit different, right? Because even as our previous speaker talked about, its genesis is at a graduate level and a postgraduate level. So we're all thinking about how do we align to, how do we develop, how do we design, how do we cultivate our students so that we're responsive to this tremendous science. And so that takes us out of a linear pattern into something that is much more organic in our way of thinking about it. And right now, let me just say, for the community college, which we would think of as similar to the first 2 years of the university, the undergraduate level, part of it is how do we make visible something that has been so heavily concentrated in post-bac areas? How do we begin to even articulate to faculty and to students and to staff, what does it look like if we want students to be able to be prepared to move into these kinds of sciences? So we've talked about adjacent fields. We talked about adjacent skill sets, and we've talked about adjacent terminology. We want our students to be nimble, and we want them to have the core ways of thinking, mindset that allow them to be scientists, to be hungry to experiment, to test, right? So those are the things that we're focused on as much as we're focused on the tangible development of programs and certifications, which seem a little elusive to us, if I can just say at our level. We have recently built a degree program, which is a reverse engineering to the programs that are at George Mason and University of Maryland, College Park. But we had to wait for them to put something out there, right, to react to. But in the meantime, we've been over here doing all of these other types of experimentation with our students. So we're still doing that, and I think that organic nature that we see in quantum science, in the end, may actually be more useful to us, because we didn't have a formula, right? We all know our formulas for design and development and education, and this has caused us to be scientists as well in terms of thinking about how it might work. And it could be the great fail that leads to the great success. Either way, I think it will end up being phenomenal in the midst of it all. All right? Our next question is, in many panels on tech talent pipelines, we hear the message that coordination across sections is needed. What does this mean in quantum information science and engineering? And the B part of the question is, can you share specific examples of success and actionable tips of how people can get started?
Sure, and I think I'll build on some of the things you were just saying with all of that, which is, I think going beyond these sort of strict programs is really important, right? And that's part of what we've really been working on doing. And also the idea of experiment, right? We got to try things and see how they're working. And some of the, just to point to a couple of the things that we've been trying, we've run some workshops at some other institution, right? Mason has a fairly heavy quantum presence. Even so, when we've talked to undergraduates, they don't all know what it is. So we do things on campus, but reaching out to other schools where there's not as much sort of visible, and it's about making that visible, about getting students engaged so that they understand where this could lead, because those formal education pieces, I think a lot of them are already in place to get them started. You know, if they want to go and learn a little bit more, sure, there may be some other pieces that they'll need to add. But it's really just knowing that they're there, knowing what it's about. So we've done one-day workshops at a variety of schools, including one that tried to pull in some of the community college students. We did one at Bowie State and one with Howard in partnership with them to try to talk to students. And what we're finding is across the board, this is really interesting and useful, right? That understanding what quantum is, understanding the possibilities is something that they're all really interested in. They want to find out more and then figure out what those paths look like. So, again, it's that trying things, see what we learn in terms of where students are at, and then how to guide them onto those next steps and those next paths that will get them into this ecosystem as they go.
Okay, and a couple of additional examples. So thanks to Jessica. And so George Mason University has partnered with Connected DMV. And one of the programs that she was talking about is a summer immersion program for our students where students get connected with job site tours and lab tours and connecting with professionals in the quantum industries. They can see what the different opportunities are and how they connect to areas of interest that they have. Some of those experiences then turn into internship opportunities. Like, these are very powerful opportunities for students when they get that firsthand on-the-job experience and they see for themselves what could it be and what kind of questions does it spark for them, what do they want to solve, and how do they want to change the world. So that's one example, and that is a quantum-focused example that came together because of partnership across higher education, K-12, and nonprofit. We have other examples. So the Fairfax County Economic Development Authority and the Northern Virginia Community College and Fairfax County Public Schools, they're collaborating on an initiative called Aim High, and that is connecting our students with industry partners who are willing to host them for talks, for job site tours. Sometimes it can evolve into internships, but these are, again, connecting points for students to see what's out there and what it inspires for them for their futures. And that's thanks to partnership and collaboration with industry and nonprofit. One that comes to mind on the nonprofit side is the Children's Science Center in our area. So it's a museum, and they have sort of like cracked this puzzle on how to create internships. They've created a whole pathway of internships. These aren't quantum-focused internships per se, but they have some internships that are with cybersecurity. For high school students, typically requires security clearances, and it's paid in the summer. So it's possible. It's very possible, but we need more. For more students to have access. When we talk about a thriving talent ecosystem, it means inspiring students from the earliest ages to see that they could have a role. What questions are unanswered? And quantum is a great proof point for that, because there are so many questions that are unanswered. They are not in the back of that textbook. And students can really see that they have a role, and that the faster you fail at asking questions and not getting the right result is getting you closer to the next breakthrough. So the internships from our partners, and then also investing young may mean weaving in these quantum science concepts. It also, to your point about the foundational skills, it means that every student should be able to engage in school in STEM and the arts opportunities and computer science learning opportunities from preschool. It's the way we learn. There's play, there's questioning, there's real problems, and then there's very intentional development of problem-solving skills that people in this field, in other STEM fields, need. So we're talking about like computational thinking, problem solving, where you would decompose complex problems and look for patterns and then abstract and simplify, create algorithms of sequences. In engineering, it's about how you ask questions. What data is available? Why is some data not available? How will I solve this problem? What ideas do I have? What perspectives do I need? How will I test it? So there's lots of potential, but it means increasing the opportunity at the earliest ages. And we have success because we have incredible educators who are creating some of those opportunities. And one more thing that I'll say in terms of fueling that success, we've had some infusion of funds that one to name is the Department of Defense Education Authority has some funding where there's some flexibility there that has allowed us to invest in people centrally who can really accelerate the development of this work and then make it accessible across our division. So we're running a program called a Code Up Grant, and because we have some centrally based staff supporting that, we've seen a full transformation in math to integrate computational thinking at all levels for students to develop their math skills with these foundational problem-solving skills. And it's that kind of flexibility in funding that can, if we had people at Central who could then accelerate our integration of superposition and measurement from quantum, like those concepts to inspire creativity and wonder, we could just progress a lot faster.
And I'll say this briefly on the way back to point to a couple of other things. One, just briefly to plug the immersion program. If you guys haven't seen it, our high school students from this summer have posters on the third floor in the main building. And that's really what they managed to do pretty much on their own, thinking about their vision for where quantum could take us after 3 weeks of work, 2 weeks virtually, and then a week on campus at Mason. And I think you'll be amazed at what some high school students can do with just a little bit of time. But to pick up on a couple of these other threads, one important piece for us in this program, to echo this idea of accessibility, is to make sure that we're paying students to participate, because we don't want the choice to be a summer job versus participating in a program like this. It's really important that we give all students that opportunity, and if we don't do that, there are a lot of students who are just going to have to not apply, not join us, because they've got to go get a job. So that's a choice that we've made. Of course, now we're looking for funding to try to figure out what to do next to make sure that we can keep this going. But it's really been an important and great experience for them. In terms of working this earlier and earlier, I think there's been a lot of view of this is something for sort of the end of college and graduate school. And we've been working with a lot of teachers to think about how do we get it into courses, and how do we get it into courses beyond physics and computer science, which are taken by a tiny fraction of our students. So again, if we want this to be something that all students see, it has to be there earlier, and it has to be there in courses other than those two. So we've got some teachers in chemistry, some in math that we've worked with, and we've actually started a project with elementary school teachers to talk to them about what quantum is and how might they bring it to their students, which is really exciting. So we've been engaging with a group of teachers, over the last year, and we'll actually be going into classrooms over the next year as they try to incorporate it into some of their lessons to see where we can put it. Because if it's in our elementary schools as something that kids have heard about, that's starting to reach all of them and give them the spark to think about what is this and how might I pursue it into the future.
Excellent. Let's look at our next question in the interest of time. What challenges are unique to the quantum talent ecosystem, and how do you imagine to turn those challenges into opportunities?
So I think the challenges aren't necessarily entirely unique to quantum, but I think given where the field is, the way we solve this problem maybe gives us a different kind of opportunity. So when we think about creating, let's say, a course for high school students in quantum, there's learning outcomes that you need. It would be ideal that those learning outcomes are closely tied to what people in the industry need for employees to have when you're applying for those jobs. So as we develop the quantum industry, if we could get much more clarity around what are the credentials, what are those specific skills that are needed for the different entry points, whether it is for a high school student to enter into an opportunity or a university or someone who's career transitioning further into their career, what are the learning outcomes that are needed, and then communicate those so that they get into the learning outcomes for students. So you have to just model that after whichever state or nation you're working with, but in Virginia, our standards of learning go on a 7-year rotation. So if we could get industry to collaborate with our Department of Education on what the learning outcomes ought to be and where they fit, we have the national Q12 education initiative, and that is the groundwork. So we have a lot to build upon, but I think that would be one one problem to solve. The other one, very quickly to name, is making sure that when you think about industry platforms and what it is that you want the employees in your field to have, those skills, the practice they have with your platforms, making sure that you're making platforms that are safe for use for high school students or for K-12 altogether, depending on the learning outcomes. So if it's very much an industry-based platform, you need to make sure that it meets all of our data privacy and data tracking and other kinds of laws. And so that would be a breakthrough if we could have, across all sectors, not just quantum, making sure those platforms are available.
Great. Well, I mean, I'll start with at the university level, and I think this is one that's been echoed many, many times, right? The fact that quantum is so interdisciplinary. But that's a real challenge at universities. We are not structured to work seamlessly across those boundaries. And it's something that we struggle with every day. How to actually create programs that actually span those boundaries as they should and do. I mean, we have people from all the different departments, all the different colleges working on this. How do we actually get them together and do this in a way that makes sense? We're currently trying to stand up an interdisciplinary master's degree that's outside of a department, and it turns out that is really hard to do in ways that it shouldn't be. And similarly, I think I'm going to just echo this progression piece, right? That we're trying to figure out what the progression is from those earliest ages into this field, but it's all forming and changing as we go. And that is both a challenge, but also something that's an exciting thing to work with, that gives us an advantage. It's not done. We can try things out and see where they go. It's not well formed for good and bad. Although I will say for our elementary teachers, that's been a real struggle because they keep saying, well, what are the high school teachers going to need them to know for us to teach them that? We don't even know that. We don't know what the university instructors want them to know yet, right? So it's all sort of forming at the same time, which offers us some advantages, but it is also at the same time very much a challenge.
I would also add that there's a need for what I would call a layperson's language around quantum, right? Meaning newspaper level. If you were to just sit in your neighborhood and hang out at the park, or right, you've got your parenting mom meetups or whatever, and you say the term quantum, do people begin to glaze over and keep it moving? So there's a need for a layperson's language around this field. That begins to unpack it in a way that then allows for us to be able to talk about outcomes. What do people need to be able to do, think, right, perform, and so on and so forth. But if we could get there and bring it out of this ethos of the scientist in a mad closet that's somewhere on the university that no one else has access to, then that also opens up the possibility. People see the interdisciplinary nature of it. They become much more interested in, and then therefore a tendency to be willing to experiment and to explore the possibility. A second barrier, challenge that I think is an opportunity for us that I hope we'll see the business community respond to is it has to become affordable, right? We will not be able to grow these scientists without access to the actual tools. And once again, if we're talking about the kind of thing that, you know, every third university gets one of, we're not going to be serving ourselves or even the world well in this particular science. So we have to think about where we get to a normative price point that provides the access for experimentation and or for other types of, again, adjacent tools that would prepare individuals to be able to actually work on a quantum computer in that way. And then I'm going to say the third thing is really this challenge that we have in America in a number of fields, and that is these are high demand, highly valuable fields and well compensated, but we don't have general interest. And unless we think about that in a very strategic way, that will continue to challenge the pipeline, because we'll have more and more demand, but we will have our individuals, us as citizens and residents, as learners, choosing other things except for the things that will be most important to us. So we have to think about what are the implications of that in the long term. But this basic ability to talk about it in layman's language that allows you just to be able to have conversations about quantum, I think, is something that is unbelievably critical. Even just creating talking points that make sense as we try to engage conversations across our economic development partners, our business partners, throughout all the levels of higher education. We need to take the time to invest in doing that. Okay. I'm not sure where we stand on the time since I'm watchless. 3 minutes, fantastic. We'll go to the next question, which is really closing thoughts, and then if there is any time afterwards, we'll take a question or two from the audience. Any closing thoughts from either of you?
I would just say, when you're thinking about the talent ecosystem, remember the power of innovation and creativity that K-12 students have. They're a core part of that ecosystem, and your return on investment, that ROI, might be 10 years down the road, depending what grade level you're investing in, but it's worth it.
And just to expand on that building these programs and helping us build these programs, even if we don't know exactly what they should look like yet, is really important. We need to be experimenting, we need to be trying them, and we need to be investing across the pipeline to start getting this out there, getting younger kids engaged, getting their teachers engaged, getting students at all levels, getting them hands-on experience and exposure to all of these topics is really, really important, and we need the support to actually do that and engage them and make sure the students are able to engage with it without having to choose that versus something else that will pay the bills.
And I would just say that we welcome the opportunity to be in the messiness of the work. And what I mean by that is quantum still strikes us as an area where a lot of things are still being figured out. And sometimes we don't want to share something until we know all the answers. I'm just saying in academia, we love being in the messiness of the work. And so it's a good opportunity for the business community, the researchers and the scientists to open their arms and to let people see their undone projects, right? The things that aren't quite public ready, but these are the spaces where we really can major in and work together and make meaning. The other thing I would say is that oftentimes our scientists are not the ones that are already in our labs. They're the students that come from very divergent backgrounds that are just simply curious. They resist structure naturally. And I would encourage us to explore the places where those types of individuals find a sense of community and a sense of worth and value. And sometimes just presenting these things as questions. What are the types of problems that quantum is designed to solve? Right? What are the questions that are being asked? And think about an iterative nature of those questions and where we might pose those questions in what sectors and what environments. And that in and of itself will introduce other people into thinking in the same way that we want the work that's being done in quantum science to address. So again, I see that he's standing to my right. That signals something. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Alicia, Alexandra, and Jessica, thank you very much.